Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. At 8:57 the morning after my wife became CEO and handed me divorce papers, she walked into the glass boardroom wearing the same white suit she'd used for the celebration the night before. She didn't look at me. She looked through me, like I was already gone. Then the board chair cleared his throat and said, "Before we vote, we need Adrian's approval." That was the first time that morning my wife actually looked afraid. 12 hours earlier, she had stood in front of 200 employees, a wall of cameras, and a giant screen with her face on it while people applauded her promotion. At 11:40 that night, she stood in our kitchen, slid a manila envelope across the marble counter, and told me our marriage had run its course. Her exact words were colder than the paper. "You've always been useful, Adrian," she said. "But useful isn't the same as necessary." She thought she was ending my marriage and my career in one move. What she didn't know was that by then, I had already seen everything. I'm not the kind of man people notice first. That was always Vanessa's gift. She could walk into a room full of investors and have them leaning toward her in 3 minutes. She knew what to say, when to smile, when to touch a wrist, when to pause. She looked like success before success even arrived. I was the opposite. I built things. Quietly. Carefully. I'm a systems engineer by training, and I founded our company from a spare bedroom with 2 monitors, a folding desk, and a borrowed server rack from a friend in college. Vanessa came in 6 months later when I had a working product and no idea how to sell it. She brought order, polish, and hunger. A lot of hunger. At first, I loved that about her. We were good together in those early years. I built the platform. She brought in the clients. I worked 18-hour days writing code, fixing failures, handling operations. She handled the pitch decks, the conferences, the reporters, the board dinners. People called us a power couple. We even believed it. When we got married, the company still had less than 20 employees. 10 years later, we had over 700 offices in 3 states and clients big enough that people in our industry used our name like a verb. And somewhere in that climb, Vanessa stopped seeing the company as something we built and started seeing it as something she deserved. The first changes were small enough to ignore if you loved someone. She stopped asking my opinion in meetings, then started correcting me in front of people. She began introducing me as our technical founder, the way someone might describe a piece of furniture that still worked but no longer matched the room. At home, her phone lived face down. At dinners, she was present in body, nowhere else in spirit. Then came the language. "We need sharper optics. You're not board-facing. People trust vision more than operations." That last one stayed with me, because operations was the reason the company existed. Vision didn't keep servers alive at 2 a.m. Vision didn't save contracts when a rollout failed. Vision didn't sit beside a dying client relationship and rebuild trust line by line. But I let it go. Then she asked me to sign a post-nuptial agreement. She did it on a Sunday morning over coffee, like she was asking me to renew car insurance. "It's just clean planning," she said. "My advisors think it's smarter now that I'm being considered for the top role." I didn't sign it that day. Not because I thought she was cheating. Not because I thought she'd leave. Honestly, I was just tired of everything in our life sounding like a strategy memo. A week later, our general counsel emailed me by mistake. He recalled the message less than a minute later, but not before I saw the subject line. Transition timeline and marital exposure. If you've ever spent your life building systems, you know the moment a pattern stops being random. I didn't confront him. I didn't confront her. I called an old friend of mine named Elias, a corporate attorney who had helped us set up the company in the beginning, back when nobody thought we'd survive 2 years. I sent him screenshots. He called me 10 minutes later and asked one question. "Adrian, did you keep the original IP structure?" I had. In the earliest days, before investors, Elias had insisted that the core software architecture and 2 key patents sit inside a separate holding entity owned by me personally, then licensed exclusively to the company. It was a protection measure. At the time, it felt overly cautious. Vanessa hated it. She said it made us look unsophisticated. That clause ended up saving me. Over the next 2 weeks, I stopped being a husband and started becoming an observer. Quietly. I checked expense approvals. Strange legal invoices had been coded to executive strategy. A private investigator had been retained 6 weeks earlier. Not by me. I checked device sync logs on our home network. Vanessa had linked her tablet to a private cloud folder she thought was separate from our shared system. It wasn't. Inside were draft statements, divorce timelines, and a half-finished memo about leadership realignment after CEO succession. That was bad enough. Then I found the messages between Vanessa and Martin, our CFO. Not romantic. Worse. Calculated. Martin had been helping her move numbers between quarters to make the latest growth forecast look stronger before the board vote. Deferred liabilities were being masked through vendor timing and side letters. Not enough to blow up the company overnight, but enough to mislead the board during a CEO transition. And buried inside one thread was the line that changed everything. Once Adrian signs or reacts, we can isolate him as unstable and remove him from the board within the quarter. I read that message 3 times. It's strange what betrayal does when it moves from fear to evidence. The pain doesn't disappear. It hardens. It becomes useful. That night, while Vanessa was at a leadership dinner, I copied every relevant file. I sent them to Elias, to an external forensic accountant, and to one independent board member I still trusted, a woman named Diane who had joined us before the company became fashionable. Then I packed one overnight bag and moved it into my car. I didn't want a dramatic scene. I wanted sequence. Timing. Proof. The next evening was the succession event. Vanessa wore navy silk. The board announced that our longtime CEO was stepping down for health reasons and that Vanessa would become acting CEO pending formal ratification at the morning session. People clapped. Cameras flashed. She gave a speech about stewardship, innovation, and the future. She thanked almost everyone. When she mentioned me, it was one line. And to my husband Adrian, whose early work helped lay the foundation. Helped lay the foundation. Like I'd poured one bucket of cement and wandered off. I smiled for the cameras. I even kissed her cheek. At 11:40 p.m., she handed me the divorce papers in our kitchen. No tears. No hesitation. No attempt at mercy. I've spoken to legal, she said. It'll be cleaner if we move quickly. Cleaner for who? I asked. For both of us, she said, but she couldn't even fake that part. Then she said the thing I'll never forget. By tomorrow, people will understand who was actually carrying all this. I looked at her for a long second. The woman in front of me had my wife's face, my wife's voice, my wife's wedding ring. But whatever used to be human between us had been replaced by ambitions so polished it almost looked elegant. I asked her one question. Does Martin know you're filing tonight? A tiny pause. Barely there. But enough. Then she smiled, thin and cruel. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I nodded, took the envelope and said, okay. That scared her more than if I'd shouted. The next morning, she entered the boardroom expecting surrender. Instead, she found Diane, outside counsel, our auditors, and me already seated. Martin looked pale the moment he saw the printed binders. Vanessa still tried to perform confidence. Can we begin? She asked. The board chair said, not until Adrian votes on whether this meeting proceeds under the current agenda. She turned to me, finally realizing something had shifted. Why would his vote matter? Diane answered before I could. Because under the licensing structure tied to the company's core operating architecture, any change in executive control while there is evidence of material misrepresentation triggers founder consent review. Vanessa blinked. That's not enforceable. Elias, sitting 2 seats down as my counsel, opened a folder. It is. Especially when paired with the side letters your CFO failed to disclose. Martin actually made a sound. Not a word. More like the noise a person makes when their body understands the fall before their mind does. Vanessa looked at me then, not like a wife, not even like an enemy. Like someone discovering the floor wasn't where she left it. Adrian, she said quietly, whatever this is, we can discuss it privately. I almost laughed. Privately. After serving me divorce papers in the middle of a power move. The board chair asked me, do you approve proceeding with the ratification vote under current conditions? I slid a packet across the table. No, I said. I'm requesting an emergency review by the audit committee and submitting evidence that the acting CEO and CFO misled the board during succession. Vanessa's voice sharpened. That is absurd. Page 12, I said. Diane opened the packet. Expense coding for external surveillance on a board member's spouse. Page 19, I said. Another director spoke, slower this time. Draft separation strategy tied to leadership timing. Vanessa's face drained. Page 27, Elias added. Internal messages regarding deferred liabilities and planned removal of a sitting board member through reputational framing. Martin started talking too fast. Those were informal discussions. None of that was finalized. Stop, Diane said. Just stop. The room changed after that. Power has a sound when it leaves people. It sounds like silence, paperwork, and chairs no longer leaning your way. Vanessa tried once more. She straightened her shoulders and said, "This is a personal retaliation disguised as governance." I looked her right in the eye. "No," I said. "The divorce was personal. This is governance." Nobody moved for a second. Then the board voted to suspend ratification, place Martin on immediate leave, and appoint Diane as interim executive chair pending investigation. Vanessa wasn't fired that minute, but she was stripped of authority before lunch. Her company email was frozen before noon. Security walked Martin out through the side elevator. Vanessa left the room without looking at me. The fallout took months, not minutes. The audit found enough financial manipulation to trigger restatements and regulatory review. Martin took a settlement and disappeared from the industry. Vanessa tried to frame herself as a victim of internal politics, but the documents were too clear, the timing too ugly, the divorce filing too convenient. Even people who once admired her stopped returning her calls. As for the marriage, it ended exactly the way it deserved to. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. She fought for the house, the image, the narrative. I didn't fight for any of that. I kept my dignity, my board exit package, my original holding company, and the one thing she never understood how to value, peace. A year later, I sold the license rights back to the company under new leadership and stepped away for good. I bought a smaller place near the water. I sleep better now than I did in that giant glass house we used to call success. Sometimes people ask if I regret helping build her career. I don't. Regret is for mistakes you didn't learn from. What I built was real. The company was real. My work was real. Even my love at the time was real. But so was the lesson. Never confuse being underestimated with being powerless. Vanessa thought I was the quiet man in the background. The safe one. The useful one. The one too decent to hit back. She was half right. I was decent. I just wasn't defenseless. And the morning after she tried to erase me, an entire boardroom learned the difference. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.